Hello everyone! This is Remleiz from 40k Theories, and welcome to this new episode of Adeptus Podcastus. Joining me as always is Tactica Imperialis.
Hello everyone!
And joining us as our returning guest this week, the one and only and flying solo today, Wib. Ow, I just banged the bloody mic on, what the hell? Never mind, here, but it's Wib. Wib's here.
Hello, I am not smacking my microphone, so I guess I win. Yeah. How are you folks doing today?
Yeah, I mean, it's the weekend. It's nearly summer holidays. Just got to keep on keeping on. And I actually have a few games of 10th under my belt, which means that I actually get to talk about 10th, which is nice.
Oh. I will be very interested to hear your thoughts, considering that I have only learnt about it in an abstract way, because I only got the... I only got my hands on the physical rulebook like 2 days ago and haven't had a chance to do anything with it yet. So,
but yes. Wib, didn't you know they put the rules on the internet 2 weeks ago? Why can't you download the PDF, you scrub?
Because some of us have a bizarre brain thing where when I look at things on a screen, my brain cannot take them in. I need them in a book. For some reason. That's the only reason I can understand rules. I do not understand why.
And in fairness, some people just prefer the weight of something in your hands.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've printed off for Warhammer Club 8 copies of the core rules section, and then we've also found, I think it was either Reddit or a Discord or something, a reference sheet for all the universal special rules, and we've just printed and photocopied that. That's The website's off, I think it's either a Hivemind Discord or a Hivemind Reddit or something. I haven't got the sheet to hand, which has got all the USLs, not just the weapon ones, which are well collated in the rulebook, but all the other ones too, like Fly, Stealth, Fight First, and all of them are tied up, and they've actually put them into one lovely page you can just print. So
nice.
If I find that, I might ask one of my colleagues, because they printed it for me, where they found it. If I remember, I might, and if Revan proves to comment, of course, add the link into a comment, because it might be a really useful resource, because one of the things I've found with 10th is that when you're doing weapons, it's brilliant. But finding the actual USRs, is not as easy, like Stealth or Lone Operative, and they're all scattered about. Like, for example, charging units fight first is still a mechanic in 10th edition. Do you know where it tells you that?
No.
On page 1 of the charge phase section. As is not mentioned once in the fight phase section, where you would think to check who fights first. It is mentioned that if a unit declares a charge and successfully makes a charge move, it gains the fight first rule that turn. But it does not say that anywhere in the fight phase. It says it in the charge phase, and you're expected to remember. Which, considering that most people know how the charge phase works and therefore won't read that bit of the rulebook, means you could easily get confused and forget that charging units fight first still.
Oh, GW.
You see, I've long maintained that the Games Workshop design department have come down with a chronic case of tournament brain, which means they have to write everything in this kind of labyrinthine lawyer-esque way so that it cannot be misinterpreted, which ends up inadvertently making things more incomprehensible, but just in a new, fascinating way.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. It leads to odd things like that sometimes, where you sit there and you go, okay, this should be here, and no, it's over here. And I think the...
it's like some kind of... it's like some kind of weird way of...
It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, and
some kind of weird way of...
Sorry. Sorry, go on then.
It's like some kind of weird way to get rid of rules as written and as rules as intended kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're trying to get rid of any distinction between the two. They want it to be as written, to be as specific as possible kind of thing.
Yeah, it feels like something that because I very much remember when I first got back into playing during 5th edition, and the game was still very
easy to learn.
It wasn't as bad as it was. It was easy to learn, but also it was very vague in some areas and up for interpretation. And over time, they've really cut down on that. And I think it is very much to do with the fact that the tournament scene has got so kind of big
And shouty.
that you don't want people. Yeah, you don't want people arguing. I totally understand the principle. Like, you don't want people spending tournament time arguing over specific interpretations of rules. So you want to have it written in such a way that it cannot be misunderstood or abused. So you can't have someone, line up all of their recruit all along an edge to stop bikes, coming in from reserves, the classic. You don't want those instances happening, as fun and legendary as they are.
Yeah, or like the old trick of Tau in 6th edition, where you had a line of recruit in front of your army, so if your opponent charged them, your entire army got Overwatch.
Yeah.
Like, that level of bullshit.
Yeah, you don't want that, and I do appreciate that, but also, can they please write rules like humans again?
Yeah, to be honest, I have no objection to the writing of the rules. Like, I read the rules and I explain them to the students, and they've always made perfect sense. Like, you just need to remember, sustained hits means if you roll a 6 to hit, you get an extra dice. Lethal hits, if you roll a 6 to hit, it's all, you just don't roll it to wound. The rules themselves are very, very well written. But it's the layout. And do you know what I think it's missing? Thinking of 5th edition. Do you remember, Wib, the quick reference sheet?
I don't think I ever used it in 5th, but when I first started was 3rd edition, where they literally gave you a card with the box set that had basically everything you needed to know on either side. So
yeah,
same back in 2nd, yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think 10th needs, is a little reminder of the steps through a few things. So, for example, you might have like the turn. So you go command phase, movement phase, reinforcements step goes at the end of the movement phase. So you make sure that that's listed there. Shooting phase. And for example, I forgot that the battle shock phase now goes before command phase. It's not the end of the turn. It's the start of the...
What's the rules, lawyers?
So yes, the battle shock phase goes at the start of the next turn for every unit that is under half strength, not at the end of the turn for every unit that was reduced to below half strength that turn, which is something that as someone who's used to doing leadership checks at the end of the phase or the end of the turn is actually a bit of a headfuck that I've had to re-unlearn. So a sheet like that would be great. But I think the biggest, well, not slap in the face, but the thing that I find most hilarious is, do you know what the psychic keyword does?
Not offhand, no.
Exactly. Nothing.
Oh.
It genuinely does nothing unless there is another rule that interacts with it. So, for example, Sisters of Silence have an invulnerable save against psychic attacks. There is no psychic rules. It is just a rule that other rules interact with. Because there's...
Okay, I mean...
Like, if you go in weapon keywords, like sustained hits, lethal hits, devastating hits, assault, heavy, rapid fire, they're all there. Psychic, not there. But yeah, like, the psychic keyword doesn't do anything. And I'm not saying we need to have going back to the warp charge pool of 6th edition, because that was bullshit. And I'm not saying that... All I would say is that psychic weapons should perhaps work as... Like, the psychic rule might be like it used to be in 5th. You must pass a leadership test in order to use this ability. Like, that would be enough. Or, whatever. Just to show that psychic powers actually take a little bit of effort and have the potential to go wrong. Like, the only time you see weapons go wrong is Hazardous, which is the new rule for Gets Hot, which actually has changed as well in a very subtle but weird way, which I'll come back to. But psychic weapons, like firing off a smite, is completely risk-free.
Okay.
Using prescience and Wings of Sanguinius to fly around the board like a badass is completely risk-free. It's just a passive ability that you have.
Yeah, I never thought about that because I've looked through the rules and stuff, but yeah, I in my head I just kind of assume, oh, it's a psychic thing. Yeah, it's treated like a weapon now, but in my head there's still a risk to it. But yeah, if it's not got a specific,
Yeah, which is an interesting one. And this is one for all you plasma enthusiasts out there. Hazardous is not the old Gets Hot. So, context. Gets Hot, or the way plasma weapons used to work, is if you rolled a 1 to hit, your gun blew up and you died. Or took damage. Now what it is at the end of the damage step for that weapon. So once you've fired and removed casualties, for each weapon fired, you must roll a d6. If you roll a 1, a model dies, or larger models take mortal wounds. It is not based on your hit roll anymore. It is a separate roll that you must remember to make at the end, which to me feels like actually that's more bookwork. But what it does do is mean that, let's say you've got, and I'm making a gun up here, a plasma Gatling, they don't exist, that fired 12 shots. You don't have to take a mortal wound for each one to hit you roll. You roll once for that gun to see if it blows up. So plasma weapons that are multi-shot have been made a lot safer. Plasma weapons that are single-shot now just have an extra dice roll at the end, which means that you're not penalised for rapid firing your plasma on supercharge because you are not doubling the risk to your health.
Yeah, that seems like there's changes that happen where, you know, you sit there and you go, oh, that seems stupid. And there's other changes where you go, I don't even know what to make of that until, like, I will have played games with it. And
yeah,
that's just kind of a weird one. It's just different.
Yeah, I personally found, like, I was playing a game with a couple of students, they were using Chaos, and they had plasma guns in their squad. And I was like, right, you've got the option here, you can supercharge your gun. That means you'll do more damage and you'll wound my battlesuits on 2s, but if you roll, I misplayed the rule, if you roll a 1 to hit, you blow up. And it actually, the element of risk-reward wasn't there if you play Hazardous the way it's now supposed to be rules as written. Because the element of hazard comes after you fired the shot. You don't have that idea of, oh, I might get the benefit, but I might blow up. It's, oh, I'm going to fire the shot anyway, and if I blow up afterwards, so what? I've already done the damage. Just a little thing. And 10th is full of a lot of those little things that for someone like us, who are either old hands who played 5th and are used to the quick streamline play of 5th and to a lesser degree 6th, and people who are very used to 9th and know 9th inside out and backwards, it feels so much like 9th that you think you don't have to read the rulebook, except you actually do. You have to stop and read the rulebook constantly. Because if you don't, you're going to slightly misplay a rule.
Yeah, that was what the vibe I kind of got when going through them was it's like there's enough that like it's very, very similar, but just different enough in enough ways that you have to kind of stop and go, all right, this is like this is like this. I can't just automatically assume, because I mean, speaking as someone that never really like internalized 9th edition in any meaningful way, the amount of times I was just stopping and going like, okay, this is the thing, the things that always trip me up are the things that are quite close but not exactly to 8th, because that one got in my brain a lot easier for some reason. And so I'm very aware going into this one that I need to like really read each thing before I play a game of it, because I know enough has changed. Because it feels like, I mean, tell me if I'm off base here, but there's like a very different design philosophy, and I know they have talked about this, but going into this edition,
simplified, not simple.
Which I would argue that sometimes they miss that mark quite significantly, but you know, if they're going into it with that idea, that's very different to what we were going with before. And it's weird that they added a dice roll for plasma, because a lot of the time what they've done is reduced mental load and things like the fact that weapons have their ballistic skill baked into them now, as opposed to it being your character. So it means that no longer you have to like think about things like power fists reducing your to hit roll, because they just have a to hit roll baked into them. That's one less bit of maths, even if it's just -1, but it's one less bit of maths you're doing. So adding a roll is kind of a little against that, because that's kind of what in my head the philosophy was very much based around, where it's just like, oh, we didn't need to do an extra thing here, so let's just not. Adding an extra thing is a little,
It's
just
a lot of little things. Yeah, I think it's one of those of, we're coming at this as the perspective of people who've played this game for years.
Yeah.
Like, I've now been through 6 editions of 40k. I know you guys, you picked up the game in 5th, but I played it before. Rem played it long before I did. But we're coming from this of, we've learned to internalize the rules and just rock on with it. And thus we're seeing these minor changes and going, oh God, that's a nitpick I have to get my head around. But I reckon if you're new or you're inexperienced with 9th, your ability to pick this game up is incredibly quick. And I know this because many of our students who struggled massively to get their head around 9th, things like combat sequencing, things like command points, things like all that palaver really, are already now semi-fluent after 2 games.
Well, they're a lot more manageable, if nothing else, and that's going to help, you know?
Like, we're playing detachment rules and faction rules. We did neither of those things in 9th because it was too many things to get your head round. We haven't done enhancements yet, but 6 of one, half a dozen the other. We're still developing, and we're going to add all those things in as we go. The one thing that's annoying me, and this is a Tau person nitpicking. This is not a 40k nitpick. This is a Neve nitpick. Is fuck me. Why can't I play Montcar? It's doing my bloody head in that I have to play camping Tau because my entire army's detachment rule is built around camping. I would much rather they had made Calyon and Montcar the faction rule where you picked one, and then for the greater good was the detachment ability. Sorry, Rob.
I said you'll get them in the codex eventually.
I know, but that could be 2 years.
Well, at least, let's just hope you're not in the same boat as the Imperial Guard. Like, here's your codex, and a new edition comes out in like 2 months' time.
Yeah.
It's worse for them, but it's just one of those.
They got screwed. They were screwed. Imperial Guard players. Like, their codex was bare bones, even by the standards of 9th edition codices. It was bare bones.
But it was broken.
It was broken, but it was bare bones, and they got it literally like, here's your codex. Now it's obsolete.
I mean, there's always one codex that suffers that fate, especially these days when,
yeah, but like, if you go back to like 7th edition, the codices that became obsolete right at the end, they weren't like the main faction codices. They were like side codices. It was things like Codex Eandon, Codex Militarum Tempestus, Codex Homunculi Covenants. It wasn't the main standard armies. They were well established long before those codices came out. So basically, if you were playing like, oh, I want to play, a Tempestus army, congratulations, it's obsolete now, but at least you used to play Guard for like a good year or so before then.
That's true. I did just want to add something to something you said, Neve, about the game probably being better for new players. And that's something because I really did notice that with the with all the points values and how the armies are built now. Because when I was looking at it, I was like, if you are building an army right now for 10th edition, and that counts if you're an old returning player or if you're a new player.
Yeah,
it is so simple to put together an army. Like you can Before we all used apps all the time to just make a list or what have you, like writing them out by hand is a right pain in the arse. Like, oh, I've got this upgrade, this, blah blah blah.
It was so fun though.
I enjoyed it, but it was a faff, and sometimes you were sitting there with like if you're sitting there with a huge thing of numbers, whereas now you can just with a single sheet and like. A calculator quickly knock up a list in like a couple of minutes. It's nothing.
That reminds me.
But the thing is, I find
sorry, Ram, you're getting cut off a lot today.
Sorry, man.
Story of my life.
But the thing is that the fact the way you're building it is brilliant if you're doing it now because you build things with the idea that nothing costs anything different. Because if I presume everyone knows, but basically upgrades are all free. Yeah, all upgrades are free. Which is fine if you're building something now because you build stuff with that in mind. But I don't know about you, but I have never, ever built an army like that ever at any point in 40k.
Yeah, I have a thought to say, but I'm going to let Rem say what he was going to say before I do.
I was just going to say, speaking of building armies on the app, have you seen what Kiriev's done on the app?
Yes.
an army that's literally just Lionel Johnson and 8 dreadnoughts.
A snipe army list, I see, yes.
And the fact there's enough dreadnoughts, you can still play by the rule of 3 and get away with it.
It's like 6 Brutalis and 2 Redemptors.
No, 3 Ballistas, 3 Brutalis, 2 Redemptors. There's enough dreadnought variants.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I misread Ballistas and Brutalis.
Yeah, doesn't break the rule of 3.
But yeah, the whole thing of that, because things are free now, and if you're coming into it with a new army, then you're fine. But if you're going into it with an old army, I'm looking at all my old stuff and going like, well, I built this unit, when I had to think about these extra upgrades cost me points. So I've got loads of things built that are just like, well, they're just a worse version. If it's like I bring this army to a table now, and this unit is just worse than someone else's version of this unit. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's just worse. And they cost the same amount of points. I don't know. That kind of sucks. And I feel it's kind of... It's kind of...
It does seem silly.
It's one of those things that is very much a problem only for people that are bringing an old army to the fore, which does make the cynic in me go, well, they just want you to build a new army. And I'm like, well, the joke's on you. I'm building an army out of things that are 30 years old.
I think the people it fucks over the most are the people that we've been saying up to now GW has supposedly been catering to. The tournament crowd.
This is very true.
Because, if you're a filthy casual, which we are, let's be honest here, we are all filthy casuals.
Proudly.
We don't care that much if our build is optimal. We want to go a little bit off rule of cool. We want to win, don't get me wrong, but rule of cool is a thing. And being able to throw our coolest looking army on the board and never have to worry about the math behind it is very nice, because you don't have to think, oh, actually, I could do with some plasma weapons for this game instead of melter weapons. Okay, that's fine. I don't have to rewrite my whole list because plasma weapons cost 2 points less than melter weapons. Or whatever. So, on that sense, it makes the game quicker to pick up, quicker to play, quicker to list write, all of that. But if you are someone who power games, and Age of Sigmar has this exact problem, by the way, but Age of Sigmar has about 2 weapon options per unit at most, not 20. So it's not quite as egregious, there is an optimal power build, and you are now not advantaged for optimized list building. I think that is something that many power gamers and tournament... Sorry, I think I'm probably being a bit pejorative there using that phrase. That a lot of competitive organised play people enjoy the minutiae of list writing to optimise every single point just the way they want it to fit every single thing. But because they've removed a chunk of options from some units, like... Did you know all battlesuit support systems are gone apart from 2 generic ones, which are boring as sin? So no multi-trackers, no velocity trackers, no advanced targeting systems, no early warning override, none of that. That's all gone. So all of your fine-tuning tweaks and list tweaks are now completely free. So you don't get an advantage over your opponent based on how well you build your list, because everyone has to build the same points values to play with, and there's less room to maneuver because everything's a multiple of bloody 5. You can't just sneak out that last couple of points here and there, or shave this in order to add that, or whatever. There isn't the same wiggle room. And it's because you don't pay by the model, you pay by the unit. That's something that's worth noting compared to Sigmar as well, because Sigmar has done this. 40k has always been, you pay by the model, which means you could, for example, I'm just going to make one up here, take a squad of 8 Khorne Berserkers in order to free up that last 17 points to take 3 extra cultists to hold an objective. Whatever. That optimization and flexibility of list building is reduced in an aim to streamline the list building process to make list building quicker, and therefore, in theory, put the onus on how you play with your army and which options you have picked within the points limit, rather than anything else. It will probably lead to far less list variety, because if all the upgrades are free, all the minutiae tweaks of this makes this unit slightly better go out the window. So they'll probably optimize list building a lot quicker, but it will come at a price of list building is quicker, easier, far more simple to understand, and far more... Yep, there's the rules lawyers coming to tell me I'm wrong again.
Look, I remove the sound of ambulances when you don't mention it. I would just remove it from the recording, but you keep lampshading it. I'm making notes down here to say, "Oh, remove this," and then you mention it. I'm like, "Well, can't do that now."
It's funnier that way.
Fine,
it is
fine. I'm not making notes. You listeners, this is this pair of jokers. This is why you have to deal with this. I was going to be professional.
You professional, please.
I put up a
What are
good.
you yelling at me for? I'm just saying it quietly.
Oh dear. But yes. Anyway, that's sort of my that whole. How long was that tangent? 20-minute tangent was kind of a bit of a sort of dissection of how we sort of feel about 10th. I know I'm the only one here who's played it, but it really does feel like that if you are new to the game or just you never really quite got your head around 9th, it's a great place to pick up and play as long as you don't mind being a bit meticulous and reading the book a few times. If you are a veteran, you're going to have to sit there and read the book a few times to when you're playing the game. Don't assume that you know the rules, even though the rules are frighteningly similar. Don't assume. The rules changes are sweeping, but subtle.
Remember, when you assume, it makes an ass out of you and me.
Correct.
Exactly.
Also, put Montcar in the fucking game, you fucking cowards.
You see, some of the
They'll
things.
do so when the codex comes out.
Shut up.
That is the thing. I think there's a lot of stuff which has been removed, but I think some of it is just going to come back when the codices come out. Like tactical squads not being able to be 5-man, they have to be 10-man, and you can't combat squad them.
The funny thing when you say that, because in 2nd edition, originally, they could only be 10-man squads, but then they had to put an addendum in White Dwarf saying, well, actually, that's a bit unfair, so here's the rules to add for the codex for 5-man squads.
And then ever since, they've had, whether it was just being able to break them down or just running them as whatever number, that's just kind of been a thing. And so I kind of suspect there's some changes like that I wouldn't be surprised if when the Space Marine Codex comes out, it's like, oh yeah, you can have a 10-man squad, but you can split it into 2 5-man for combat squads or what have you. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's stuff like that comes back in some form or another. And it's going to be interesting to see what simplifications are a permanent removal and what isn't. Although I do want to give a special shout out to just making power weapons be power weapons again, because that drove me nuts. Because the granularity of the difference between like power axes and power swords was just annoying.
Yeah, but the thing is, they've done it to combe-weapons too.
Okay, yeah, that one really confuses me. That's just weird.
I was playing a game with my Chaos Marines. I was using my Chosen. One's got combi melta, one's got a combi plasma. So I looked down and said, combi weapon. Okay. It's not. So I go down to the weapon options. Okay. One Marine replaced their bolter with a combi weapon. Right, okay, so combi plasma and combi melta mean nothing now. Got it. Which really actually removes some of the specialization of combi weapons. Oh, well.
The one that really messes me is combi flamers, because they're like such a very specific... Because flamers being such a different type of weapon in most editions. So it leads to like this oddity where it's like, I can't get my head around a combi flamer being the same weapon as a combi plasma. That feels weird.
Yeah, power weapons, I don't mind.
That was actually easier in 2nd edition, because combi flamers, okay, in shooting phase, you choose to shoot it either as a bolter or a flamer.
Yeah.
So you basically carry both weapons.
That's just the way it's been since day fucking 1. That's been the way all the way through 9th and all.
Yeah. Oh, Wib, since you have played 2nd edition, do you remember... have you ever had that incident with assault squads? Like, okay, this person's armed with a bolt pistol and power sword. This person's armed with a bolt pistol and chainsaw. This person's armed with a hand flamer and power fist. This person's armed with a plasma pistol and regular sword. And it's like trying to keep track of all that in a single combat phase.
I mean,
crisis suits.
Second edition's combat is gazing into a chaos rune at the best of times. It is wild that so if you've ever looked at the rules for the original Warhammer from 1983, it is shocking how easy that game is to understand when just a handful of years later, well, I say a handful of years later, like a decade later, they'd release 2nd edition with its absolutely ridiculous close combat rules. I don't know what was going on with the design team with 2nd edition, like that era.
I think a lot of it, they were just basically trying to transplant a lot of the rules from like 4th edition fantasy at the time, I think it was.
Yeah.
to try, because if you look at the psychology rules, these psychology rules, for example, they're exactly the same between both games.
Well, I mean, the thing is, they've the first and second edition of Warhammer Fantasy is functionally the same game. It's just an expanded version of it, and 40k is based on, I think, second edition of Warhammer Fantasy. So like they're so close at those early days that like it took a while before they started to diverge a little. So they tend to pick up odd traits of each other.
Yeah, back in then, it split off like in 3rd edition 40k when right, fuck it, we're getting rid of the movement stat.
Everything moves 6. It's fine.
Yeah. And if you're playing Eldar, you get to roll an additional d6 for fleet of foot.
Oh, I forgot about the fleet of foot rule. So that's the thing with the return of universal special rules. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. This is just what we always used to do anyway. Like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but the thing is, fleet is actually not... Fleet's not come back. They've still put advance and charge and advance and shoot on individual unit cards. They've not actually UNSR'd Fleet of Foot.
I think that is the interesting thing. Is it's been from really 8th edition onwards of the of going back and reintroducing old concepts from previous editions, but like a refined version of it. It's very. I do find it interesting from like a design perspective how they try these different things, and then sometimes they'll try them for literally like a decade and then go, yeah, no, that didn't work, and then go back to the old system. And it's interesting. I find it interesting. It's like how the modern vehicle damage system was first toyed with in like a I think I've mentioned this on this before, but the one of the Citadel Journal articles was pretty much just the modern damage system where they're just a beefy regular unit. But they did that in early 3rd edition. So there's like a huge swathe of time where they were using a completely different system, but the system they now use, they did think of pretty much straight away and then just didn't use and then came back to. It's interesting.
It's the same with being an educator, really. The same ideas just come round over and over again, just depending on what the fad of the day is. Just one thing, actually, while we're talking about rules in the news, there was a MetaWatch article today, actually, noting first an errata for the indexes, because there were some typos, there were some little things, nothing major. To be honest, actually, no, seriously, nothing major. Like, they forgot to give Be'lakor the fly keyword. They forgot to give the Soul Grinder and the Demon Prince the demon keyword. No, I'm not kidding. They forgot stuff. They forgot that, I don't know. They've made Death Company Intercessors grenade launchers AP -2. They've remembered that some Raptors don't carry a chainsword, so if you give them a melter gun, they had to give them another option. They have given Chaos Terminators a 4-up invuln save, though, so that's something of note.
I'm reminded of an instance from, like, I think it was like 3rd edition. Like, in the initial runs of, like, the 3rd edition rulebook before the Codex Eldar came out, the integrated army list, the way it was written, basically allowed you to take multiple avatars of Khaine. And then they had to put an errata on the white dwarf saying, no, you can only take one. But it was funny, just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to take about 4 or 5 avatars.
Oh, they forgot to give Gaunt's the battle line keyword.
Oh, God. I realize I'm really pissed off because Grots aren't a battle line unit anymore. So my Grot Rebellion army kind of
is illegal.
I mean, I can still use it, but I can only use a maximum of 60 Grots. I have 120 of the damn things.
Yeah,
Allied detachment.
Yeah, I don't know how the detachments and things work. I guess that's the only way to do it. Although now I have to make an.
You'll need the codex for that.
Yeah. I need an absolute...
I have 2 separate chapters of Rebel Grots. There's like the east side and the west side.
I also need a crap ton of runt herds because now you have to have the setup that's in the box where you have 1 runt herd per 10 grots, which is bad, and that's one of the times where I sit there and go, no, actually, I hate that. That's terrible and doesn't even make sense.
That's the way it was in 5th Wib.
Idea. Just get one of your grot squad leaders, put them on a box, and just say this counts as a runt herd.
That is, to be fair, my runt herds are just a grot or a couple of grots, one standing on a barrel with a squig hound. Like that's what they are. So
They also make a note in the article before we get too sidetracked, because there is an upcoming balance update for the game. Basically, Eldar are broken as shit.
Again.
It seems like every fucking edition, we start the edition, right, what's better on day one? Oh, it's Eldar. Fucking again. So, yes, they are nerfing fate dice, and they are also changing indirect fire. So, apparently shooting round corners and stuff is being a little bit overexploited. So, basically, to put a long story very, very short, quarterly points updates, 6 months rules updates, as well as just a wider errata in July, but there's also a quick index errata right now. So if you bought the book and you bought the deck, well, don't be surprised if your stuff's out of date. This is why they keep telling you to use the fucking app. I know we love books, but they go out of date within 5 minutes. Hello, Space Wolves.
Do you mean
Space Wolves went out of date a week before the book was even fucking released.
Exactly.
I'd like to point out that the app that does not run on my phone, because even though I know my phone's old, it's an iPhone 7, but like that's apparently too basic to run a spreadsheet app, I guess. So that's cool. That's not even I know it's an old phone. I'm not expecting things to be supported forever, but it is very annoying when it's oh yeah, use the app. I'm like, well, I would if I could.
On an unrelated note, I've just been reminded of something from like years and years ago. It's like the very first instance of Tale of Four Gamers, and it's for Warhammer Fantasy. I remember like in that article, one of the early articles of that. They decided to have, like, over their lunch, basically have, like, a wizard's duel. So, like, they pick their wizards from their armies and have a duel. And they pointed out how, like, the tabletop scenery was literally just the shit you get on the canteens, like, coffee cups, plates, stuff like that. But they pointed out, the best thing about that was the salt shaker because it didn't block line of sight, but it blocked line of fire. So basically, if you had a spell that didn't require line of fire, but just line of sight, you could use it. It was really good. So it's like, I don't know why I was reminded of that. I just thought, the good old days. Because that was, it was Beastmen, Skaven, Wood Elves, and Bretonnians. That Tale of Four Gamers.
Interesting.
It was Paul Sawyer's Beastmen. There's like Ian Compton's Skaven, I think it was. And the Rules Lawyers back again. We were screaming internally saying, will you stop talking about the ambulances?
I just picked up my pen. I thought maybe this time. But no.
No.
Anyway, carry on.
Requiem for Wib in the comments. In the eyes of an angel. Anyways, I was actually in the news this week because we haven't actually talked about the news yet properly.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the MetaWatch articles, just try and drag attention back towards the fact that there is actually shit going on. They put out.
It makes a change.
Well, they put out the data sheets and rules for Combat Patrol. If you want to play it, I don't because it makes me play Ethereals. So no.
Oh yeah, that's because it's just it's like a very specific.
It's the Combat Patrol box.
Yeah. An interesting idea. It's one of those like. I mean, I'm not going to use it, but I'm sure it's good for some people.
Yeah. Probably the biggest news, quote unquote, is the not Warhammer 40,000 preview. And yes, that's exactly what they're fucking calling it. So there is going to be a preview held on Saturday, July 1st. That's tomorrow at time of recording, which includes AOS, Heresy, Warcry, Underworlds, and even a new model from Old World to show. So I thought what would be a fun segment, which is really where we need Wargamer Girl, because she's fucking prescient at this stuff, is let's have a guess at what the fuck's at the preview.
I'm going to guess another Ascended Primarch model.
Name them.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Ascended Dawn, I don't know, because it's Siege of Terror. Ascended Dawn. Ascended Dawn. It's Rogal Dawn with his big shield and a hammer, or his chainsword rather, and he's kicking Fulgrim in the penis. I don't know.
You know,
Right.
I don't think you're right, but in my heart, I want it to be.
Yeah.
I'm just remembering the instances of Saturnine where basically Fulgrim turned us like, I'm going to destroy a roar, and Fulgrim was like, nah, go and kick you in the dick instead, and Fulgrim threw a tantrum and left.
I have been told, I've had it show up in my mentions a few times recently, that people think that Epic is going to show up, a new version of Epic.
That was because of a teaser at Warhammer Fest. Rem picked it up, I didn't.
Yeah, because it had like the big battle map thing. It said like war on a new scale, and I mentioned this last time. I don't think it's epic per se. I think it's a new iteration of Space Marine, which was part of the Epic game system, but it was also set during the Horus Heresy.
It could be that because then they can combine it with Adeptus Titanicus, like it used to be.
Would they dare release a game called Space Marine, though, given there's now a literal game called Space Marine?
It's called Space Marines of the Horus Heresy. I don't know.
They would look. There's the 15
it's called
names.
Legionia Astartes.
There's the 15 names of things that Games Workshop uses. They can find one of them they're not currently using.
I tell you what, they can just call it Dark Millennium. There you go.
Oh, just to make the Google searches for any one thing called Dark Millennium even more complicated.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, listen there. I mean, look at NetherRealm Studios. Their Mortal Kombat 12 they renamed to Mortal Kombat 1, or as some people prefer to call it, Mortal 1 Combat.
But
so it's like
we
got Mortal Kombat, we got Mortal Kombat, we got Mortal Kombat.
Didn't they release one not long ago that was just called Mortal Kombat?
That was MK9.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, like, when you say Mortal Kombat, are you talking about Mortal Kombat or Mortal Kombat? You say Mortal Kombat 1, are you talking about Mortal Kombat 1 or Mortal Kombat 1?
Technically, Mortal Kombat, the original game, was not called Mortal Kombat 1. There's only one game called MK1, even though everyone calls the first game MK1.
Yeah, but that's like
because when you got two Mortal Kombats, you have to differentiate between Mortal Kombat 1 and Mortal Kombat 9.
Yes, that one I'll agree with.
But that's like when it's like when you say, "Oh, I'm playing this on a PS1," and everyone assumes you just mean a PlayStation, the original PlayStation, and then you get to be pedantic and say, "No, I'm playing it on the specific PS1, the little one that was released and called a PS1."
The Xbox
the original
One
was called
comes
the
to
PSX.
mind.
Yeah, but no human calls it a PSX.
I do.
But what about the Xbox One? No one kicked up a fuss about the Xbox One.
Oh, they very much did when it first came out.
They did.
Did they? Oh, I was playing PS4 at PS3 at the time. I didn't even notice.
Everyone was like,
because you had the original Xbox and you had the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One, which everyone said, why don't you just call it the Xbox 720? You've already got 360, 720. And then people just started showing it to the X-Bone.
Yeah, I think the reason I heard the explanation for that being that they want it to be the one entertainment system that you have. So it's boring marketing speak.
Oh, fuck off.
It's the one console you'll ever need, and we're going to have permanently on DRM. Oh no, our sales are tanking, let's get rid of it. I wonder why.
Yeah, actually, I don't think, Wib, you've been on the programme since the Tomb Kings and Britannia came back.
Sometime around then, I think. Yeah, maybe.
Because Warhammer Fest was where they showed off the Tomb King and the Britannian Paladin.
They look very cool. Cause, I mean, I've got a handful of like hand-me-down models, Bretonnian ones that I've been like kind of slowly tinkering with, and I've got some Bretonnian Stormcast. So like when I see that stuff, I'm like, that could be interesting for conversion purposes. But
I just had an idea of something else that might potentially be revealed on the Horus Heresy side of things. They might reveal the Horus Primarch novel because we're due it. We've had the other ones. We're still waiting for Horus.
Possible.
Come on, Horus Primarch novel. And we guarantee that'll be sold out immediately upon being released because they'll be like, oh, it's Horus.
They always sell out.
Like, yeah, but not immediately because Sanguinius took a surprisingly long time to sell out, surprisingly. But like the Horus Primarch novel, everyone gets expected to be a huge story about Horus, and he's in it for like less than a quarter of the fucking book. Turns out the story's actually about, Mercedes Ollerton instead. You think I'm exaggerating, but that's probably what's going to happen given the track record of the Sanguinius book, where he was a supporting character in his own fucking book and it was only in for about a quarter of the time, and the rest of the book was about a fucking reporter.
Well, you see, it's because you can tell the story of the Primarch by seeing the shadow that he leaves upon the world around him.
Yeah, it's a shame that the rest of the book was set in darkness, so there was no fucking shadow.
Okay, fair.
Everything was a shadow.
I was just being pretentious.
Oh, I know. I was just being facetious. Lots of big words today, everyone. Consider this your English education. Narina would love this, I'll tell you that now. Speaking of which, she's actually coming to the UK in July.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she'll probably want to pay you a visit, Wib, so be aware of that.
You say that like I'm going to like look out my window and just see an ominous figure.
She just knocks on the door to your flat and is like, hello, I brought cinnamon buns. You will accept them. Because I'm finished, I'll kill you otherwise.
I mean, to be fair, if someone just wants to bring cinnamon buns... okay, actually, that's a bad thing to say online. No, you are not allowed to come to my flat.
Good job you closed the mailbox, eh?
Maybe I should open that again if people are going to send cinnamon buns. Someone did send Stroopwafels once, and that was a good day.
But did they send Battenberg?
No one ever did send Battenberg. I was a little shocked. My door has just gone. You carry on. I'll sort this out.
Dive in.
Oh, God.
Oh, dear. Anyway, yeah, I think Underworlds will be a warband. Warcry will be a new box game. It always is. Sigmar, I think I'm very interested to see what they're going to do, because I think we're now at the point where we need to actually properly get into the meat and potatoes of the Cities of Sigmar army. But they revealed a model just this week, and we'll get onto that. That's hilarious, by the way. We'll get back to that. But
I think for Age of Sigmar, they'll reveal some of that. What's that new expansion called again?
the Dawnbringer stuff.
Yeah, the Dawnbringer stuff.
But we already know the
Dawnbringer
book.
Chronicles, yeah.
Well, they've done the first book. That's about out. The battle forces, armies, the regiments of renown, whatever we're calling them, on pre-order already. So they haven't got any rules to show. And models-wise, I don't think it's that sensible because, well, they've just put out 4 boxes. They could, but let's get Chapter 1 out into the world before Chapter 2 gets announced and the models to go with it.
I'm back, by the way.
Yeah, I gathered that. But there's a year of build-up to AOS 4. At least a year. So I don't think there should be in any rush to hurry this expansion stuff out. Slow burn. Like we were talking about last week. Just slow down. For me, I think they should spend some time with cities, or maybe start looking at another army, because they've said cities is a slow burn. Maybe reveal the next battle tome that's coming out, because we know cities are not next. So they could reveal one of the factions that's coming out in the interim. We'll see.
Yeah.
And also, I really want to see a Cetra. I'd love to see Cetra from the Old World segment, but I don't think it will be.
Speaking of characters from the Old World, Gotrek's audio drama Realmslayer is being released as a novel this time, rather than just the script or as an audio drama. And the limited edition version of the book was revealed, and it is fucking hideous. Mainly because of the fabric cover. It's like leather spine, bronze medallion, and fabric cover, which makes it look like it's someone's horrible, horrible genes that have been dyed horribly. I say horrible a lot because it looks absolutely fucking atrocious.
Personally, I think that Games Workshop should transition to binding all of their books in blue denim. I think it'll be a good
They
look.
did that for the Lucas novel, funny enough. It was actually bound in blue denim. I'm not even joking.
I didn't know that.
Was.
Okay, that's amazing. Can I just take one second? To apologise that I had to go and grab a thing. But I just want to, since I've just got a public forum for a second, just to lambast the courier service Every, formerly Hermes, for delivering a package that was supposed to be delivered at 12:30, like at latest at 7:30. Real cool. Sorry, carry on. I just needed to be petty for a second.
That's because everyone hates everyone hates Hermes. There's a reason why everyone kept calling it herpes instead.
Yes.
Because no one liked it. I think the last experience I ever had with them was I ordered something off eBay, and then I got the thing saying like, "Oh, your item's been delivered." No, it fucking hasn't. And then I get it about like 3 days later. To be honest, I actually thought it was nicked, but because they tend to nick everyone else's. Apparently, it's actually a class action lawsuit being filed against them because so much of their stuff's actually being nicked by their couriers.
That
allegedly
does not surprise me. They are quite bad.
For legal purposes, I must say allegedly.
I'm sorry for derailing. Please carry on with relevant content.
To be honest, we were hoping Edgy was an arena with cinnamon buns, like a surprise.
Yeah, actually, that would have been great, wouldn't it? I should have just come back and gone, yeah, it was really weird. I went outside. There was no one there. There was just a package on the doorstep of just cinnamon buns, and I was like, oh wow.
And that cartoon Finnish otter thing that kept going Venus.
I was gonna like play into some Finnish stereotype, and then I realised that I do not know any Finnish stereotypes.
All you gotta do is say "perkele." Anyway.
God.
Hi, Narina.
Hello.
What are we talking about again?
You were ranting about GoTrack.
Oh yeah, fucking.
I'm sorry,
covers.
Neve. I'm really sorry.
Tumbleweed.
No, I just thought I'd cut out because as I was just waiting for Rem to carry on his rant.
I finished my rant. And I was going to post a picture for Wib saying, look, here's the copy of the that actually was encased in blue denim.
That is indeed a jook, a gene book, a jovel. Jovel. I like jovel.
Yeah.
This isn't like an old jean suit. It's like a Canadian tuxedo. This is like a Canadian book.
Good. Perfect. Wonderful.
Yeah. The last piece of news then, just to put this segment up in a bow, is the potential contender for dumbest yet best model of the year. This is the Cities of Sigmar Fusil Major, mounted on an Ogor Warhulk. Yes, that is a man in a lookout post riding on the back of an ogre with a mace and shield, to which he will drop down meat to make sure the ogre doesn't move and stays in position so he doesn't just throw him off and eat him while he does sniping. And no, not a single word of that sentence is made up. Every single word of that sentence is true, and somehow I both hate and love it in equal measure.
Okay. Firstly, this looks like something that would be designed by Terry Pratchett. And secondly, this is a very skinny ogre. Where's his paunch?
I have heard much discourse around this. I hear it's something because the City of Sigmar ones are like they don't have the culture around eating that.
They're second generation as well.
Yeah. So they're not. It's not a thing that they do for. It's like a cultural thing. So they are thinner or something.
Right.
Is what I understand. What I have been told by other people who know more than I do.
Fair enough. It's just kind of shocking. Like, not necessarily shocking. Just a bit of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Unexpected, I suppose you could say, to see such a skinny ogre. Because when you think ogres and fantasy and AOS, you think big chunky boys. And this guy is quite svelte for an ogre or ogre or whatever you want to call it.
But
I do notionally. Sorry, carry on.
I was going to talk about rules. Go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do notionally, like, I'm not a hugest fan of the design of the ogre themselves. Ogor, sorry. I'm not the hugest fan, but I do appreciate the concept of the design because it is, I feel, pure Warhammer. Like, it's an idea that is both incredibly stupid, but also kind of badass at the same time. And that's Warhammer to me. Like, it's got to be equal parts. Okay, that's kind of cool, but it's really stupid. Like, that's Warhammer to me in a nutshell. So, like, I'm generally in favour of that direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also, whenever I see a skinny ogre, my mind immediately thinks of the Gorgers. Because they also were skinny ogres, because they were, like, chucked into, like, a warpstone well to die because they were born without a paunch, and then they just mutated into, like, these things.
So we'll call the Cities of Sigmar ones the good ending for that, then.
Yes.
Yes, these are second-generation city ogres, by which I mean they're ogres from the city who have then lived there and gone on to reproduce whilst living in the city, and thus they've had to adapt to city culture to some extent. They're not just roving ogres who've been captured and turned into bastions. No.
Sorry to interrupt. Looking for that picture of the Gorger, I just stumbled across a third-party Ogre Butcher miniature that's
God.
done like Pyramid Head from Silent Hill.
Okay.
like-
Little Nightmares called. They want their villain back.
That's like the crossover I didn't expect. Silent Hill 2 and bloody Scrag the Slaughterer.
Well, that's novel.
Yeah.
So yes, the last thing to say on this thing is that we know it basically gets to do fortification. It gets to stand in a corner and ignore rend, which is actually pretty good. And hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more, as I said earlier, at the preview tomorrow. We'll know by the time this video comes out. You will know whether they did or not, but we shall see. I mean, we've got the knights, we've got this general, we've got a first look at some of the basic human soldiery, but not a full squad. And we've got a few other bits besides. It's worth noting where we stand on books is that we have actually only Cities of Sigmar coming out in autumn, I think. Seraphon are out. I believe that the red books are Harbingers, or Dawnbringer ones, I should say. So, and that one's just come out now. So I think actually, in terms of what they're going to show tomorrow, it has to be cities, or they're going to start shooting ahead, because that's what we saw at Adepticon, which I know was a few months ago, but still.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about the Marshal. I forgot about the hero they had. That was in...
Marshal and the Sheriff.
That was in 22nd of May. Was that the Quizcasters week, or we just didn't talk about it? I think it was. I think it was Quizcasters week.
It might have been. Speaking of which, when are you going to defend your tag titles?
The next time you put a Quizcasters on.
Right, we're gonna have to do it. Well, 200 is going to be another singles one, so we need to put the tag team titles up before then.
Yeah, but then you need to get Alexis back as well, because we won together.
That is true. We also need to find challengers.
Someone who knows what they're talking about, not me.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we can't have another squash match. I mean, it can't be like the last time when Neve bottled it on the towel questions. But hey,
fuck off. Genuinely, I have not stopped using the phrase chassal knocking around. I've used that phrase. I'm literally recruiting an apprentice to teach Tau so that we don't all have to play Space Marines every week at club. And I am looking for a chassal. I never say I'm looking for an apprentice because I'm never going to let myself forget that word ever again.
It was so brilliant though, because I said, what's lowest rank? La. No, fuck, it's wrong!
Yeah, and you immediately came out my mouth and I was like, oh, for feck's sake. You absolute moron.
This is why I have never put across an image of anything other than someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. So no one expects anything of me. It's great.
So this is why we need a retro round in the next episode so that Snipe and Wib can look like they actually know what they're doing.
Yeah, my knowledge of Warhammer is great, but only in very specific places.
To be fair, so is everyone else.
True.
I mean, it is just a minor tangent. I'm sorry, but it is one of the things of being an online person and just talking about this stuff. Is that you do end up with this weird pressure to know everything about everything, and it's like you just never can.
God, yeah.
Like there's going to be things you just can't know about. Like you can't know everything about the game and everything about the lore from every era. Like
there's also the fact as well, there'll be instances where you just can't remember it off the top of your head. Or you misremember and confuse with something else because there's so much there.
Yeah.
Like you might misremember what was it like in this edition? What was actually this? No, that was this edition before. No, that's edition after. Yeah. Oh, fuck.
And it gets even more. It gets even worse when you start trying to research that shit, because you'll find that
don't I know it?
So much of when you get outside of what's in books, when you get into the culture surrounding things, because obviously Codex Compliance got one foot in obviously the lore and the game, but there's another aspect of it is talking about
the design side of things.
The context within which things are released as well. And some of the times that's really hard to find out. Like I remember when we did the 3rd edition Tau Codex and was talking about Fisher Fury, and I quickly found out that everyone who talks about it is remembering stuff from over a decade ago, and so every version of the story is slightly different. Everyone remembers how it was used slightly differently, and everyone thinks things happened in different orders. So they'll talk about, oh, this was done in reaction to this codex release in this edition, and then you actually look at the release order and you go, well, that's physically impossible. I find that really interesting. There's a folklore aspect to this stuff because it's not, written down as such. It's just word of mouth, and as the data rot of the internet sets in, and you start losing forums and stuff. This stuff, any authentic of the time talking about it kind of disappears and makes my job much worse. But I find that interesting. Sorry, I'll stop tangenting. I'll sit here quietly on my hands for a while.
No, you don't.
No, you're quite all right. Go for it.
I mean, to be honest, I could probably go on a tangent about how some of the sites, like, the Wiki and Lexicon, they miscategorize, certain miniatures. Like I said, oh yeah, this miniature's from 2nd edition. It's like, no, that's a 3rd edition miniature because they didn't have that design of bolt from 2nd edition. Now that's that kind of effect. Or
the part that
it's the 2nd edition. The 2nd edition Vindicators, the Vindicator tank didn't have a 40k scale model in 2nd edition. Kind of thing.
But the one that always drives me nuts with because
an epic scale, but didn't have a 40k scale one.
Because as much as Lexiconum is the better 40k wiki, the thing that drives me
the sources,
the thing that drives me nuts about Lexiconum is that it is constantly striving to be so up to date that it misses all context of the history of the game whatsoever.
Oh god, yeah.
So if they granted, some articles do have this is a section on conflicting sources, so it'll say, okay, so in this edition it said this, and in this edition it said that, but most articles don't have that. And so, I don't know, it feels like it treats the game as that it's always been coherent, as opposed to what it really is, which is an incoherent mess.
It's never been coherent.
I know, but Lexicon kind of treats it as if it is, and I think sometimes that gives people the wrong idea about the history of the game.
I mean, don't get me wrong, whenever I come across conflicting sources for some of my videos, I will try to, as best as I can, to try and consolidate the two as best as I can. But if there is a discrepancy, I will point to it as for example, it says here that the Black Templars hate every single type of Psyker, but this codex says that they actually honor astropaths because they're touched by the Emperor. So kind of thing. So I try and consolidate that kind of thing. It's very hard at times.
I did the same thing with 40k stories back in the day, where because my narrator was an in-universe perspective, I would just sort of say, the records are a bit hazy here, with some suggesting this and others suggesting that. As far as I see it, I think it was probably something like this. I had an in-universe character going for 40k stories, and so I would spin it this is a first-party narrator reading third-party information and trying to piece together a coherent narrative, exactly as Lexicanum does, trying to piece together a coherent narrative by patching together this mishmash of sources.
I mean, there's also the whole aspect of... Sorry.
I was saying, I remember, fairly recently, I had a conversation with Oculus Imperia regarding Belisarius Core, because, some details about him, they drastically differ from, the 8th edition codex and his novel. A lot of the events are drastically different. For example, his novel, he absorbed the brain and the personality and the memory and the soul of a guy called Sedaine, who worked on the original Space Marine project. But the 8th edition codex says that he worked on the project himself and was the person who actually developed the Black Carapace. It's just two conflicting sources that came out around pretty much the exact same time. It's for fuck's sake.
I mean, there is the other aspect, which is something that Games Workshop have a spotty relationship with upholding, which is the idea that so much of what we read is from an unreliable narrator. Because I was having a conversation with someone. I say a conversation. I commented on a thing they said on
Dicey, wasn't it?
On Twitter. Yeah, it was Dicey. About
I commented in that same thread. Yeah,
one of my favorite bits of lore that I read recently of an old piece it was in the Assassins video we did recently.
2nd edition codex, wasn't it?
where they mention in it, they say basically at the end of explaining what has happened during a bit of the Wars of Vindication, they give a specific explanation as the propagandistic lie that they are telling everyone else, what goes in the official records, to say what happened. Earlier on in the Codex, it uses that exact phrase in the official rundown of what happened, which I think is a genius little bit of world building, because it tells you everything you read in here is from a certain perspective, and you cannot take everything as being gospel because it is from an authoritarian system's own propaganda is what you are reading effectively. Sometimes it will be true, and sometimes it's kind of hard for it to be anything other than what it is, and you see evidence that backs it up, so you know that definitely is how it happened because you may see it in something or what have you. But the whole game's kind of had this running through it, and it's kind of and I think sometimes that is forgotten both by players, understandably, and by Games Workshop themselves. So you end up with this kind of thing where it's very easy to go, oh, there's conflicting sources. Well, that's because one of them's the truth and one of them's a lie, but they will never tell you which one, which I think, I personally think they should lean more into that, but then I am a force of small c chaos. So, you know.
There's a really good example of this in the 3rd edition rulebook, where there's like an in-universe Inquisitor's report about the cult of the Star Child and the Sensei. And a lot of people took that as gospel, saying, "Oh yeah, the Sensei, they've always been, a Zinchian plot, or whatever." And yet, what people didn't take into account was that this was an in-universe report from an Inquisitor, so of course they're going to have a biased point of view anyway. Of course, unreliable narrative is going to be a huge thing here because it's an Inquisitor. They have a religious zealot Inquisitor. Of course, there's going to be a bias towards their opinion in the report, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's. I think it's that point at which people stop thinking of these things as being stories to build a universe that you can play games in and that they can tell stories in, and this kind of in-universe propaganda offers texture to that, and reinforces the satire that they're often a little bit iffy about how good they are at presenting, and instead treating everything as just being a list of things to write on the wiki. And it's like, no, sometimes you got to interpret this stuff in a slightly more nuanced way, and that's the intention.
Yeah.
That's the writers being writers,
Yeah,
it's cool.
I mean, people criticize something like the MCU for having inconsistencies in its writing when it was all overseen by the same two blokes who made up about 20 films. Trying to keep a coherent, consistent narrative that you can string together. And it's like what you were saying about a universe versus a story. Warhammer is a setting and that you tell stories in. And thus, there is not a plot thread. There is an overarching setting in which you can tell stories along a new overarching idea or theme. Like, for example, at the moment, we've got the Mega Hive Fleet. We had the Pariah Nexus and the Return of the Silent King. We had the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Rise of Guilliman, the 13th Black Crusade. These massive events. But there's not about the story. There will not be a book that tells the story of the Fourth Tyrannic War. There will be stories set within...
Isn't that what the Leviathan novel is about?
No, it is about... It's not about the whole entire war.
I'm joking.
I know you are, but just for the people who maybe didn't catch that, in the novels like Leviathan, whilst they are scenes within the setting, they are stories within the setting, they suffer massively from unreliable narrator and lack of continuity, because it's a whole galaxy of nonsense and lack of common sense. So if a actual planned narrative cinematic universe of about 20 films overseen by two blokes can have problems with narrative consistency, I don't think there was ever going to be a way that 40k, even if it wasn't actively retconning shit, could ever create something that you could write something like Lexicanum endeavours to write.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be inconsistency. And this is not a bash on Lexicanum. I really enjoy using Lexicanum as a source, just for the record. They were where I got most of the research I did.
It's better than the wiki, which in places it has been known to just outright make up sources.
Oh yeah.
You know, so if someone says, "Oh, shall I read the wiki?" It's like, no.
My favorite thing about
next time maybe not be as detailed, but it's better cited.
My favorite thing about the 40k Wikia is how it will say a lot of stuff and then just at the bottom list its sources, but not tell you what bit is from where.
Yeah, like,
so you just
again, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but when I was trying to do research for a video on the Sons of Malice, they were writing all those things like, oh yeah, the chapter master of the Sons of Malice is named so-and-so, and that's a reference to the character of Caleb Dark, who was originally a character from Warhammer Fantasy, and stuff like. The chapter master of the Sons of Malice has never been mentioned in a story. He's only been listed as the chapter master. And like one of the sources they listed was an issue of White Dwarf, and they gave a page number and everything for this one, which is rare. But I had that copy of White Dwarf. I checked the page number. Do you know what that page number led me to? It was an article on how to use demons in a Tau army to fight against demon hunters.
You see, this is a trick when you lie on the internet, which is that you cite a source safe in the knowledge that 99% of people will never actually go and check that source.
However, if you fuck around, expect to find out one day when that nitpicky asshole comes along.
I'd say one thing that was actually pretty interesting, like one thing I did appreciate, it was the guy who ran the Spanish 40k wiki, because he found my old video on the raptor cult, you know, for the Chaos Raptors, you know, the god of the raptor cult, and he contacted me saying, like, I saw you mention about, you know, it's rumored that the Raptors worship a minor Chaos god. Can you tell me where that's from, please? And I said, yeah, it's from this issue of White Dwarf here. I've actually got a screenshot of the article. Here you go. And he thanked me for that. I said, oh, cheers. Yeah, so I appreciate the fact he came up to me and said, like, you said it was in this. Can you just tell me where it's from? Yeah, here you go. Cheers. So, yeah.
No, that's cool. It's it's interesting because the impossibility of holding every single thing that has happened within just Warhammer in general, but 40k specific being the thing that I'm more familiar with. Like trying to hold all of it in your head at the same time is impossible. Like you can only hold so much of it, and so you know sometimes it is just you know. You have to pool your resources, and sometimes you just have to admit you don't know stuff, and it's fine. Actually, I don't know anything.
I'll be the first person to turn around and say to you, like, I know fuck all about Imperial Knights. I'll be the first person to say that to you. You know, I do know.
They're big and stompy.
Yeah,
that's what I know.
Like,
yeah. But
I know fuck all about Imperial Knights. My knowledge about Necrons is not that great. I'll admit that. You know. Tau, I mean, that's what I come to Neve. Like, hey, Neve, can you just explain this thing about Tau for me?
It's happened a lot. Like, you actually asked me the other day, what do you know about the Corvatra?
Yeah.
Spoilers.
And stuff like that. It's just like... and there'd be times like, well, I personally get surprised where I think like, oh, this is a very, very common bit of lore, and people would turn around and say, I've never fucking noticed in my life. Or like, people don't know. Like, for me personally, I think it's common knowledge, you know, what the GC4s, the Raven Guard are, and you have, like, at Quizcastus, and, like, no one got the question about the Raven Guard right. It's like, oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, it's one of those... I'm sorry.
No, carry on.
It's one of those of, like... It's one of the things, like, common knowledge is... You've got to remember that with most literary and other universes is most people's understanding is they barely know the basics. Like... Most of them could probably tell you who the Emperor is, but they probably couldn't tell you why he's a skeleton. Most of them could probably tell you what an orc is, but they couldn't tell you about the time they nearly conquered Earth. Most of them know what chaos is. Could they tell you anything about how demons work or who the chaos gods are? Probably not. Like, what we consider to be surface level, like, oh yeah, this is basic shit, understanding, for most people is new information. And what we consider, okay, that's a little bit obscure, like Gene Seed Floors of the Raven Guard, classic example. Like, I half know that because I did a video on it 6 fucking years ago. 7 years ago. as the only reason I have any recollection of that, because I did research for a video 7 years ago. So for most people, that is obscure as all hell, because they're never going to actually, unless it's their dedicated faction, and they can be asked to read all the literature, which is a lot of bloody literature. You're not going to know that. Like, is it stated in the Space Marine Codex lore section on the Raven Guard that these are their gene seed defects? No. Yes. So they're not. Oh, it is.
Actually, yes.
Okay, in more recent editions, then.
It was mentioned in the 8th edition one. It was also mentioned in their Codex supplement in 8th edition. I know that for a fact. I couldn't tell you about 9th.
Yeah, so that means anyone who is less than 4 years into Warhammer 40,000 has never heard that before, unless they've gone out of their way to buy a novel or an out-of-date book.
I think that there is that thing, because there is so much, and like we all have ended up in a very specific situations where we are expected to talk about this stuff publicly, and so there is a weird, I mentioned earlier, there's a weird pressure for us to know a lot of this stuff. So yeah, and for a lot of people, they'll just learn the bits that they want to learn about. They'll learn about their faction. They'll learn about the bits that interest them. And that's kind of it. Although I was surprised when we made the a Rogue Trader video, the very first one, and we did the thing about Obi-Wan Sherlock Clouseau, which we included because it was funny, but we were like, but everyone will know about that. And the amount of people that had never heard of Obi-Wan Sherlock Clouseau, and that was like a moment where I had to it was an eye-opening thing to readjust my brain and go, oh right, I've got brain worms. Okay, yeah, other people don't have. Not everyone has that level. Okay, right. Readjusting. All right, okay, good.
I'd say one thing I did I pointed out, basically being pretty much accurate, is when I asked Phil Kelly, hey, is this accurate to the height difference between a Space Marine and a Tau Fire Warrior? And he said, yeah, that's an accurate height difference.
Good.
Yes, for the record for the viewers, there is a picture of the Great Khali stood in front of Rey Mysterio. So yes, that there's your context as to what the hell Rem's talking about, because he hasn't got the technology to put pictures on the screen because he is a techno pleb.
Yeah.
No, there's no
Phil
one
Kelly
has
to say it was right. So
no one has ever invented what a podcast with slides. No one could possibly invent that.
Not of Windows Movie Maker, they can't.
Hell, I made the podcast off fucking iMovie and I could do it.
Yeah, but iMovie's better than Windows Movie Maker.
Aware, but still. Hell.
Your commitment to Windows Movie Maker is honestly so endearing and fascinating to me, Rem.
It's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But hey.
But it is broken. It was broke when it was new. I can't say anything. I use Vegas. I can't. I
was going to say, hey, it doesn't crash as much as Vegas.
This is true, but
score one for Windows Movie Maker.
But Vegas has options and features.
Isn't that just a posh way of saying entrees?
No, I'm just saying you can make videos with it. And I have literally made a podcast with slides when I did the Men with Funny Heads episodes where we were doing ships, sci-fi ships, and I put up pictures of them on the screen. So you can do it in Vegas. So there.
Sci-fi ships. Okay, so I take it you put what's it? Bashir and Garrick in that, didn't you?
We did do a Star Trek one, so that would have been a funny gag. But we were being nerds about individual ships and complaining about the Prometheus class. Normal stuff.
I think when you were mentioning about that, I think Oculus did actually reply to you with Garrick and Bashir, and I replied to that with 7 of 9 and the Doctor. This is now turned into a Star Trek podcast out of nowhere. Live long and prosper and all that. But anyway,
Strange New Worlds is really good. I watched episode 3 earlier of season 2. It's really good.
And In the Pale Moonlight is the best episode of Deep Space Nine. I will die on that hill.
I would not argue with that, although I do prefer Far Beyond the Stars, personally.
Fair enough. And Neve's here too.
Yes, hi.
Oh, Neve, have you watched Akira yet? I'll take that as a no.
Of course
I've watched 95% of Akira when I was a teenager because it was in between doing some exams and we had to leave like 5 minutes before the end, and I have just never watched that last 5 minutes.
Aww. I just find it as a funny trope to ask Neve constantly have you watched Akira, and to the point where the guests we had on say, you know, watched Akira. Like we had was that Mark Collins on, and he was like shocked and said, you not seen Akira?
The worst part is I've watched Steam Boy all the way through, but I haven't watched all of Akira.
Oh God, Steam Boy was dreadful though.
Yeah, but
the only good thing about it is the fact it had Patrick Stewart in it.
Look, I think it's been long established that I don't watch things because they're good. I watch things because I have problems, and I sometimes feel the need to watch terrible things. I have compulsions. I can't help it.
Speaking of terrible things to watch, the Ultramarines movie. That was kind of bad, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty.
The only good thing about it was the best thing about that movie was John Hurt.
Yes.
Well,
yes,
the best thing about most movies John Hurt is in is John Hurt.
True.
Like, just the inclusion of John Hurt in things just instantly made them better.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just surprised the fact that the story was written by Dan Abnett and it was that bad. Like, this is your very first combat mission, he says to a squad of tactical marines who would have spent years in the scout company and then in the Devastator company and then in the assault company before even being anywhere near a tactical squad.
But Rem, if you read the tie-in graphic novel, it explained that they were fast-tracked from scouts into a tactical squad.
Which means that still would have been their fucking first combat mission because they would have had a combat experience as a scout.
Look, okay, they came up with an explanation. I didn't say it was a good explanation. That's why I did it in a mocking voice.
It was a piss-poor explanation. It was a piss-poor explanation for a piss-poor movie.
It was...
With a demon prince that looked like fucking Kevin Nash because it was so fucking top-heavy with scrawny little chicken legs.
It was funny looking. Like... I did get a real kick out of how goofy that thing was.
And I'll be honest, I didn't expect to get a Kevin Nash reference in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Hey.
Fair play.
Fair play. Speaking of pro wrestlers, we still need to get Shayna Baszler on the show at some point.
Yes, please. Wasn't she? She was in Horus Heresy gear when they won the tag titles.
Yeah, she won. She was wearing Luna Wolf's themed gear. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that get shared around on the Twitters.
Even I saw that, and I go out of my way to never have to engage with wrestling.
Yeah, but you can't. You follow Rem on Twitter. Enough said.
Yeah, I say I go out of my way, but I fail. I get sent horrifying documentaries by Rem.
Yes. Like the new Jack.
Yeah, and Rem just sends me consistently, like, hey, watch this match. Hey, watch this promo. Hey, did you realize Impact Wrestling is a thing? Like, yes, I know. I barely have the time to even watch anything. I know Impact exists, but I haven't got time.
Speaking of which, they're actually got a TV deal in the UK again now.
See what I mean? Sorry.
I'm just going to spam you with Joe Hendry videos later.
Yeah, I'll go find the block button if I have to.
In fairness, my limited knowledge, I can say, Joe Hendry seems cool.
He is cool.
Yeah.
I believe in Joe Hendry.
I think we should all believe in him.
And all the non-wrestling fans are probably sitting there thinking, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, there's literally a comment on last week's episode. Where has it gone? I was just reading all of them. I wonder if they will answer my question. Wrestling question. Well, this episode's a wash then.
In fairness, I did answer that question in my Patreon QA this month, so...
Yeah, I know. It's just like, we do go on a bit. And I know, I remember actually been keeping a close eye on the comments about, like, how do people feel about the fact that we just spend our time here rambling. So yeah, it's just interesting about like how we've gone into such a show of like, we're just talking. We're just here having a chat.
Well, I mean, I would argue that what is a if it was just answering questions, it would be a Q&A, but it's a podcast where people talk about things.
Yeah, but like we used to have such a
pile of secrets.
Yeah, we used to have such a structure that we'd go, right, start, little intro, do the news, talk about all the bits of the news, maybe have a rant in the middle, talk about a book, go through all of that, then when we're done, do questions, go home. And it's very structured, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing that structure in any way, shape or form, because, it works, clearly. But it's interesting hearing the reactions from the comments that actually people come not for necessarily what we are talking about, but just to listen to us talk. There's a comment here that says it really nicely. Just listening to two geeks talk about Warhammer is nice. The news and release is nice, as the book summaries, but just listening to two geeks talk about Warhammer. If you two just decided to pick a topic from the lore to talk about, I'd be down for that. It's just waffling on and talking about whatever. Yeah, it just works.
Yeah, it's part of, one of the things that's nice about podcasting is that, you can, or podcasts in general, really, is that, you can just find some people that you kind of like their vibe, and, you can just then, you can listen to them have conversations and stuff. And whilst it is, sometimes the content of what they're talking about can, is important. Ultimately, it's about the people who are doing it, and how you gel with them, and how you feel about them. And at a certain point, there's plenty of people who I listen to podcasts of who, frankly, I could listen to them talk about any old bollocks and it'd be fine, because you just kind of you're just cool to hear a fun conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Do not parasocial at me.
But it's sort of if there's a particular comment you would just like us to wax lyrical about, you can always ask it as a question, or you can just say, hey, you should talk about this. And I'm sure that we might not do it every single time, but we could easily do it the odd now and then of just be like, yeah, actually.
How would you feel about, say, occasionally doing a special, a very special Podcastus episode where you just kind of pick an interesting topic and you just kind of do that as an episode? You abandon the usual format and just, because I will say, you pair have such an ludicrously in-depth knowledge of this stuff that, honestly, I feel like I'm basically I'm a small child listening to the grown-ups talk about business sometimes. I'm just like, I think that they should make more books at the Book Factory. Yeah, but
my favorite dinosaur's a Gorgosaurus.
Yeah, but because you've got so much detailed knowledge, that could be a fun avenue to sort of discuss some topics, and especially here today we've talked about some topics that sort of veer in and out of Warhammer, not just as a collection of lore, but as a fictional world and what goes into that. And your perspectives are really interesting. And so I think I'm not saying you should. I'm not telling you how to run your podcast, but I think you could totally do that, and that people would enjoy that. People in the comments, funny thing is, tell them you would enjoy that.
There's a field test for that, and I know this because it's the first time Rem and I ever talked to each other, because tiny little 17-year-old Tack, who just started making the odd lore theory videos, stumbled onto Rem, messaged Rem, hey, I'm thinking of doing a video about whether the Emperor could be a Chaos God. Fancy a chat? And we talked for nearly an hour, and that video, at time of recording this episode, stands at... Hold on. No, shut up. It stands at... Oh, it's not... 83,000 views from me and Rem discussing whether the Emperor is a Chaos God for 50 minutes. And this was when I had less than 1,000 subs as well. That was the video that put me on the map. So yeah, there is a recipe for that. I just don't know if it would be right to put that under the Podcastus banner, because the podcast is a podcast where we discuss various things, but doing what is essentially a 1 hour or 2 hour lore video with discussion, I'm not getting into the philosophical of what is a podcast, but
because it definitely would be a podcast, yes, but by any metric.
But is that a podcastus?
Well, there you're getting into an almost metaphysical discussion, a philosophical look on what you consider to be your content. What I will tell you is that on occasions I see other people try and explain exactly what the series Codex Compliant is, and that's really cute because I don't know what it means. It is whatever weird obsession bugbear I get in my brain that month, and I decide to spiral and have an existential crisis and write a script. That's what that series is. And there's rules as to what I and Snipe consider goes into that series, but it's not clear to anyone else.
To be Codex compliant, in fact.
Yeah, whatever goes into it is what Codex compliant is whatever Snipe and I decide it is. Whatever the Podcastus is whatever you pair decide it is.
Interesting thoughts, and again, always interested to see what the comments have to say.
And if nothing else, then it allows you to mix things up, especially say if you've got a slow news week and you can do something different.
That is
just an option. Another tool in the toolkit.
Yeah, I mean, I do really love running Quizcasters. I've got nothing against the current podcast format. There's nothing against it. It's great. I love having this conversation and all that. But just the last couple of episodes where Rem and I, and obviously yourself today, have just talked. Like, we've barely come in with a plan, because there's been so little news. It's been 2 weeks of slow news because it's all been 10th, that it's been a slow week. So we've had to fill time. And by filling time, we've just talked. No plan, no prep, just talked. And it's interesting just to see, like, when you've just got the open floor to talk about whatever you want and go wherever you want, versus, actually, can we have an open discussion but where there is a set theme? According to the theme is Warhammer, but even that we can't stick to. But can we narrow that down further to make it that the theme this week will be, right, niche stuff about Space Marines, or it might be like a full-on like debate of like on the level of, is the Emperor a Chaos God? That's just the episode, is that theme. Or is it better that snippets like that become like a major segment sandwiched in between? So like, is it better to do that, or maybe even do it and then cut that bit out in the editing and upload it as a separate video so that you can sort of draw more eyes to it rather than it being buried away inside a podcast? Because people are going to want to see that debate, but if they see, oh, it's a podcast episode, are they actually going to click it because they don't know that the debate is actually going on? I don't know. Just interesting stuff, and it depends on how much you care about the algorithm versus what's fun and what's interesting. And I know that that's a difficult question to answer.
Yes, I will get back to you on my feelings about the algorithm after discovering how the video that was uploaded just before we started recording is doing, considering that we've had a fairly low output recently. I will tell you how I feel about the algorithm afterwards.
Yes, I'm sure.
Sacrifice your firstborn to the algorithm. The algorithm gods demand blood.
But no, you raise an interesting point to get very inside baseball about it. But what we do on this stuff is obviously affected by the algorithm of things, of that there's stuff that some people really like, but it doesn't necessarily do numbers, and you do have to do a little bit of calculation of like, is it worth doing that thing for how the extra time and maybe research it takes? Is it worth doing that for the potential maybe loss of attention that you get? It sucks because it's just the nature of the beast, because we're reliant on ad revenue and stuff like that to pay bills. So it sucks, but it's just part of the nature of being an online content creator in present year.
Yep.
And on that depressing note,
God,
it's also cool because it means that we can do things like this.
Yeah,
that is true.
So it's not all bad. It's not all bad. I released a 20-minute video which was just a way of me excising my weird obsession with the Lamenters, and I've been able to do that and get to call that my job, and that's just a thing that feels weird. And it's not the product of a sane world, but I'm very grateful. Speaking of, I do want to say I am grateful for this for you on very short notice getting me in for this, because it means that I'm not just staring at the comments coming in and getting weirdly obsessed with doing that this evening. So
you're
thank
welcome
you for
then,
that.
I guess.
Yeah, this is technically you've done me a favour.
Well, we've technically done you a favour, but you have actually done us a favour. But yes.
Okay.
So theoretical and practical, or whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone's a winner.
Everyone's a winner.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Maybe the audience will discover when the comments roll in.
And it'll just be people like, what the fuck is this?
What was this? They got like halfway through, and then they just seemed to all have an existential crisis and just started, just talking about nothing. Like it was
Existential crisis. I'm about to have a midlife crisis. I better go out and buy a Ferrari.
You're going to use those YouTube, the AdSense dollars, those huge AdSense dollars that Social Blade talks about.
Oh, anyone who uses Social Blade as an actual quote-unquote accurate metric is fucking misinformed, because it's so wrong. It's so wrong. Like, I've seen on Social Blade like days like, oh yeah, you've earned -$500. Like, no, I fucking haven't.
I prefer the other websites that talk about the net worth of
oh god, those
of YouTubers, and I'm sitting there eating cold rice pudding, looking at this thing telling me I'm worth 80 grand. Like, oh, that's interesting.
I suppose if you want to sell the channel, it's like, well, it says here you have to buy it for 80 grand. So
I can't actually remember the actual figure. I think it was less than 80 grand, in fairness, but I have not looked in a long time.
£2.50 for mine, probably.
But anyway, where was this podcast going?
It was going down into depression. We all growing older and we're growing more depressed and cynical.
I'll tell you what.
Life's a bitch, and then you marry one.
Shall I bring you a
As someone who got
Warhammer
married 2 months ago, I resent that statement.
Fair enough.
Shall I tell you?
I just remember an old saying from someone. I just it seemed appropriate for where I was going. But anyway,
I'll tell you a fun Warhammer thing that has been happening recently. That I think has been a fun thing for me, which is that I have started painting epic miniatures. Because we got a handful of them in the PO box, and so I've been painting them, and it's meant that
Sons of Medusa, wasn't it?
Yes, it's meant that I've been experimenting a lot more with the new. Well, I say new; it was a while ago now, but when they brought out the newer, more vibrant contrast paints, and they mixed up the formula a little bit. And because I was a little sort of dubious of contrast when I first heard it, and then I tried it, and I was like, well, this is all right. It does a thing, but I'm going to stick with my old methods. I don't have the control that I want, and I don't think the results are good enough to warrant that lack of control for my style anyway. I know for other people it works good, but, the newer stuff, the more vibrant, these new vibrant ones, amazing. Green, striking Scorpion Green, doing Sons of Medusa, absolutely perfect. Like lovely coverage. Like you can patch it up and you can't, and it's not super obvious. Like just amazing. I've been really impressed with it and how vibrant it is. Just great. Just it's been nice to just go, oh hey, this new thing I was dubious of, and turns out actually really good. So I've been happy about that. Just quite fun. Just quite fun.
Excellent.
Plus, you can paint like you realize you go rather than painting like one figure every 2 days because I'm slow. It means I paint like 5 things a day. So it's just like this is great because they're tiny.
Yeah, I can see the appeal. Like mass production is something that is difficult to do. Batch painting it's a skill, batch painting. It's not something you do. But I think as an Orcs player, you'd be pretty good at it, considering you've painted 120 grots.
What I tend to do is do because I'm not. I find it difficult to batch paint because it means that in my head it takes so long to paint an individual figure. I start to lose, like the motivation for it. But what I found works for me is that I just paint in batch. Like for the grots, I paint in like batches of like 3 or 4.
I do 5s. I remember doing 5s.
Sorry to interrupt. I just saw someone's painting of a Guardian squad from Epic. They stationed it next to like an unpainted Primaris miniature, and how well that is painted! Like, holy shit! For Epic scale, like, Jesus.
Some people didn't someone enter an Epic scale grot into Golden Demon this year?
I don't recall.
Just a single grot. And I've recently painted a couple of squads of epic scale grots. My God, are those things tiny? Because, oh my God.
The balls on that person.
Yeah, no. And they did it really well. Obviously, you can barely see a bloody thing because it is an epic scale grot. I realised that some people listening to this probably might not have a super keen awareness of this. Epic was a really small scale game that Games Workshop used to do. They're like 6mm scale models, so they are incredibly tiny. The individual infantry models are.
Oh, I found that that person's Twitter, the person who did those Guardians, found their Twitter, so I'll put a link to that. But like,
excellent.
How well that's paying for fucking Epic scale. Like, Jesus. I think they actually magnetized the base as well.
Like, never underestimate how extra people can be.
I'm just thinking, like, what the actual hell? It's insane.
Yeah, not human.
PCO did it? Hey, another wrestling reference. Who would have thought?
But yeah, no, it's I've been thoroughly enjoying that. I've also painted a few Battlefleet Gothic ships, which are also very good for batch painting because they're like 90% dry brushing because of all the little crenellations on them and stuff. Very easy to do a very large batch of them very quickly, which is quite satisfying if you're, again, like me, a very not necessarily like super highly skilled or anything, but like it just takes me a long time. I'm just kind of meticulous with things in a way that just means everything takes a million years, and it doesn't necessarily come across in the final product for how much time I put into them. But you know.
Yeah.
But did you paint any of the ships from Space Fleet, though?
Yes. I painted the set of it that we've got. I painted all the ships, and because I wanted to go one extra, I made a bunch of tokens for it for all of the status effects that can affect the ships, but there's no way in the game inherently of keeping track of them. So I made a bunch of little tokens so you'd know if your ship was on fire or what have you.
Oh, bloody hell. I found someone saying, like, a boxed copy of Space Fleet, like, a boxed new copy, $220 they want for it.
Ooh, that's a fair bit.
I'm assuming, sorry, can you fill in the uneducated and, you know,
Space Fleet was the game that... Space Fleet was the game that was basically the great-grandfather of Battlefleet Gothic.
I have a feeling that's what it was, but I thought I would actually ask, because you're talking about this, and I'm like, is this just Battlefleet Gothic, but old?
Okay, to give a potted version of the story of the entire video we made about it once, basically they were going to make the game Battlefleet Gothic. It's actually teased in the Book of the Astronomicon, the 1988 40k, like, first expansion book. They tease it in there, and that was going to be Battlefleet Gothic, but then apparently the game was boring and bad, and so they never released it, but they repurposed the models that were made for it to release a small box game in a small range of beginner games that included, like, Crunch and Ultramarines and I forget what the third one was, or the fourth one was. Forget what that one was called.
Deathblow, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't Deathblow. So it's a Warhammer Fantasy one. I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But they released a bunch of these small ones, and it was just a really simple, basic little game where you just had two Imperial ships, two Eldar ships, and you just kind of had to outmaneuver each other to take shots at each other, and then over the course of a handful...
Mighty Warriors,
that's the one. Because in my brain I was thinking Mighty Empires, but I knew that was the later small...
That's the Tiles game.
Yeah, it's the Tiles thing. And then they slowly expanded it into a more fully fledged game, which was more of a precursor to Battlefleet Gothic. When Battlefleet Gothic, the actual game, came out, they reused the name because it was just cool and as a nod to what came before.
Fair enough.
Yeah, there's like a 20-minute video on our channel if you want to watch. If you want to know more about it, I talk. We talked a lot about it. Then the base game is very, very simple, but actually, I think it's genuinely quite fun.
Oh. Excuse me. Sorry, been a long day.
No worries. See, this is when I talk about my knowledge of Warhammer.
You're not sending me to sleep.
No, it's like it's deep, but only in hyper-specific areas. This is one of them.
Yeah, fair. I understand that completely. It's like me with physics. It's like I have a master's degree in physics, and I can intricately remember 99% of the shit I did in my degree to some level. But you ask me what are the chambers of the heart called? I'm fucked. Genuinely, I'm not making this up. I have had to resort to Among Us tactics to remember the chambers of the heart.
I'm sorry, what?
So basically, this is how I've learned to teach myself to remember the chambers of the heart and what order you go, because I always used to get my atria and ventricles wrong. So what I've had to do is that the blood arrives in the heart through the veins into the atrium, which is my cafeterium, and then they ventricle out into the arteries. And yes, that's how I had to teach myself the fucking structure of the heart, even though I'm a goddamn science teacher. Because
if it works.
If it works, it works.
It's just a mnemonic. It's a way to teach things. I still, to this day, remember the rhyme that not the rhyme, but the term that we had to come up with to remember the electromagnetic spectrum, which was Gerald Xavier usually likes incinerating minute rodents. And so that's why
backwards.
Well, that was the way round we were taught it, where it was gamma first.
I always remember the thing we learned on like year 2 or something, or year 3. Sorry, year 3. Basically, how to spell the word necessary. It was never eat cress, eat salad sandwiches, and remain young.
Yeah, it's weird. And we still all remember Richard of York gave battle in vain, don't we? Or was that just me? Sorry? Richard of York gave battle in vain for the colours of the rainbow.
Yeah, no, I never heard that one.
That was me the Yorkie then.
I remember never eat shredded wheat for your compass.
No, if you're from where I am, that's never ever support Wednesday because you come from Sheffield.
Yeah, I won't lie, to this day, I have to do never eat shredded wheat because I don't trust myself to do it, so I have to do it in my head every time.
Yeah, there are so many different things that you pick up in teaching. Like I've actually done, so there's a type of thing called the displacement reaction, and I am going to watch a local about science because I don't get to do this very often, where basically reactivity of metals affecting like what compounds are made. It's how you get metals out the ground and all this. And genuinely, the way I teach it to the kids is, the jealous girlfriend meme?
Yeah.
Of hot girl, boyfriend looking over shoulder, a girlfriend looking annoyed.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That one, but chemistry. And genuinely, it works every time.
That's the thing. If you've got a stupid way of explaining something, but it's accurate and people remember it, then it's not stupid.
Yeah, I've said it so many times. Like, I don't mind looking like a little bit of a prat if it helps you understand, because it's one of those things. You never actually remember your lessons. You remember your teachers, and all of us now probably, if we're thinking back to school, we're thinking, I really enjoyed science. I really enjoyed science with such and such. You remember the teacher as much as anything else, and trying to get that across. And it's the same with Warhammer. Like, the first games you play, you remember not what you learned, you remember how you were taught it, because you keep using that every single time that you play the game. Like 5th edition, I still remember exactly working through exactly how it all works, because I played it so many times and we all taught each other. And I know now, playing 10th, that the kids are going to call sustained hits exploding sixes, because that's what we call them. We call them exploding sixes out of habit, because that's what we called them in 9th, because they didn't have a keyword for it.
Well, it's exploding dice, which is that from an old edition of D&D, exploding dice?
Maybe.
It's where that term comes from.
Whenever you say sustained and dice, I always remember sustained fire dice from 2nd edition.
Well, it's like how there's so many things like the various rules in like 8th and 9th all had their hyper specific rules for every individual unit, and like if you were playing from before that, you go, oh, they just deep strike, oh, it's feel no pain, you just don't, you never called it by its actual name because you just you knew it as the old thing that it is what it is.
I just remembered, speaking of Sustained Fire, with 2nd edition, because you know how like from 3rd edition onwards, all plasma weapons, like, they had the risk of exploding, whatever.
Yeah.
In 2nd edition, it was only Chaos plasma weapons that had that risk. Because they're all weapons from Horus Heresy, and they were older, and there was more unstable technology. But, as a trade-off, you got to use Sustained Fire dice, so you could potentially get 3 shots off of a plasma weapon a turn. But there's risk of it exploding and killing the model holding the weapon. But
yeah, and nowadays, it's only Tau plasma rifles that have 0 chance of killing you.
Yeah.
Am I remembering correctly that in 3rd edition, the plasma cannons, if you rolled a 1 and it exploded, it didn't just kill you, it was a blast template.
Yeah.
So you could kill, like, your entire... Well, maybe not your entire squad unless you really bunched them up, but you could...
I think it was only a blast if you basically did a full power shot and fucked it up. Because you could, you do half charge and full charge for the heavy plasma gun.
You can still do that now.
Yeah, but I think it only had a blast template if it blew up when you misfired on the full charge.
Yeah, and Rem's just another one. Misfire. So I was talking earlier about gets hot. The rule's called fucking Hazardous.
Yeah.
And yet I'm calling it gets hot out of habit, which is...
I'm starting to think that this game might be a bit confusing.
No, correction. The game is fine, but humans exist.
Well, yeah, okay.
And humans who have different memories and strategies to remember things will remember it differently and therefore get themselves all fucking in a tiz.
Do you remember... sorry to keep asking Wib, because I know you've actually played 2nd edition. Did you ever use an Assault Cannon Terminator in 2nd edition at all?
No, did we? I can't remember if Snipe had one. I don't think we did.
Because the Assault Cannon, you got 3 Sustained Fire dice.
Yeah, I do remember that, because I remember looking up the rules for it and just looking at it and going, ooh, okay.
So you could potentially get 9 shots off a turn, potentially, with that. But if you rolled 3 jams, then that model's dead, because it basically blew up. But it was just like the fact that, I got Terminator squad that's got 2 Assault Cannons, so you can potentially get, 18 shots off a turn from just those 2 models. Bloody hell, that was... Oh.
Again, it's the trying to keep all the different editions rules
separate
in your head can be very difficult, especially when concepts are brought over that sometimes have the same names and sometimes don't. It gets
it's going to be really interesting, because when I think deep strike, my brain goes, I want a scatter dice.
In my head, it still feels like to do a deep strike is risky because you could get lost.
It could go wrong.
You could whiff that roll. So, deep striking a Terminator squad. Oh, do you really want to take that risk? You should probably just put them in a Land Raider. It's safer. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the devastating wounds. I do realize there's a rule called devastating hits and lethal hits and devastating wounds, and I genuinely, lethal hits is 6s to hit auto wound, but devastating wounds is just rending, except it's not rending, because rending meant 6s to wound became AP, ignore all armor. This is 6s to wound become mortals, which we all understand as a rule, but even though it's not the same rule as rending, I still call it fucking rending.
Yeah, you can't help it. You can't help but translate these things over into different, it gets even worse if you play other tabletop games as well, and you just start introducing other elements from...
Oh god, rend in AP. How many times have I said, right, what's the rend on that bolt gun? So many times. But it's something, again, I've said this to my students, of not just in Warhammer in general, but it's all well and good me telling you what do you need to know, but you need to be able to translate it into your speak so that you understand it. So get it out of Neve speak into you speak so that you can actually understand what the hell you're doing.
Well, as an interesting example of that, we recently did a video on the new Star Wars game, Shatterpoint. And it's a cool game that's actually quite simple to pick up, but the rules are written in the most convoluted way that, like, I had, like, because it was a thing that we were sent, so it was like an official, like, review copy and everything, and we got it before it was released. And it's the first time that's happened. We were like, okay, we're going to do this properly. And I'm sitting there reading the rules and going, I feel my IQ dropping reading this thing. Like, I am getting stupider as I am reading this because I cannot comprehend it. But then as soon as I started playing it, I was like, this is actually really simple. It's explained in such a weird way. And then it meant that when I came, because then I was like, I went to Snipe and was like, okay, so I'll just teach you how to play this. It'll be easier than you reading it. And I was able to explain it in like 5 minutes. It's like really simple because all it required was just a change of language to something that I knew that we would understand easier.
Yep. Exactly. And that's what you were saying all the way back nearly 2 hours ago about writing in this like very literal rules as written, you can't fuck this up speech so that it's easy to understand and that judges can interpret it and players have got no grey areas to argue over. But realistically, there will still be rules as interpreted because what people read is like, yes, this is what the rule is. But what does that mean exactly? And and therefore, and when they try to translate, there are people like us who translate. It's like, okay, so this unit has deep strike, right? That means I can do this, but not this. But actually, what it means actually is you could do that, but not that, and your brain has to catch up, and therefore you run into a thing. And like, for example, at the moment in 10th, I do not believe there is a rule about what turn reserves can come on the board. We believe you can deep strike from 9 inches away on turn 1.
I am pretty sure I read a thing somewhere in the rules about it not being able to be done on turn 1, but I may be.
Well, I can't remember where it is. If the comments can remember where it is and provide a page reference, that'd be lovely because it's something that we've always played it as you can't come on turn 1 because that's what we know and that's common sense. Because otherwise, deep strike is just an upside. Yeah. But we just weren't actually sure.
Oh, here's a quick question because obviously you've played 10th. I did just want to ask. So I was thinking about it when I was having a quick glance over it. With the way that the new units are structured, is there actually a limit on how many like character models you can take? Apart from obviously you can only have 3 of each. You know,
there is no limit on anything except that you must have at least 1 leader. You must have no more than 1 of each epic hero. You must have. That's it. Actually, there's not like a battle line minimum. It's you can have more than 3 of a battle line unit, but 3 of everything else. So what you said? No.
Okay, so that means that if you are careful and you pick the different variant versions of it that have a different stat line, then
Captains,
you could make an army entirely out of Primaris lieutenants. It is now possible.
You could run a grand total of I think there's actually only 2 variants. There's the lieutenant. Oh no, there's 3. There's the lieutenant, the Reaver lieutenant, and the lieutenant in Phobos armor. And I believe that's actually it, although I'm willing to be corrected.
You're still going to be.
You can make an entire army of Primaris captains.
I guess
because
because
you've got the regular you've got captain in Gravis, captain in Terminator, captain in Phobos,
Captain America in a shield.
Jump pack, although not for Chaos. Chaos Lord with jump pack doesn't exist, even though it has a model. No. Genuinely, I literally, you know the old Chaos Lord with lightning claws, like the super old like Raptor model? I bought one, painted one on commission for a friend, and they're not allowed to use it. Even though Space Marines get a Lord with jump pack, Chaos don't. It's bullshit.
And on that note, given the time, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh shit, have we rambled on so long we just completely forgot the clock? Oops.
Yes. Yep. So, thank you very much to everyone who joined in for this episode. We hope you enjoyed these wild tangents this episode. And thank you very much to Wib for joining us at the very last minute. It is sincerely appreciated.
It is not a problem. As I say, you have done me a favour. So it is completely fine anytime. It is a pleasure to speak to the pair of you.
And be sure to give our regards to Snipe when you can.
I will do.
So, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Remleiz from 40k Theories.
This has been me from Tactica Imperialis.
This has been Wib.
And we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.